I was a cleaning lady with $3 in my pocket and an eviction notice on my door, until the most dangerous man in New York offered me $10,000 to be his fake date for a weekend. I thought I was just playing a part, but I didn't know I was walking into a mafia war, or that I'd end up in the bed of a man who kills for a living. By the time I learned his darkest secret, it was too late to run. If you love stories about dangerous secrets and deep passion, subscribe now and stay tuned until the very end, because the final twist will change everything you think you know. Amara stood in the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan, holding an eviction notice. She had 3 degrees from Lagos but was cleaning offices in New York just to send money back to her sick mother. Her rent was 3 months late, and the heat in her tiny apartment had been cut off. When a black SUV pulled up beside her, she didn't run. She was too tired to be afraid. A man in a suit worth more than her life stepped out and offered her $10,000 for 1 weekend of work. All she had to do was pretend to be the girlfriend of a man named Dominic at a high society wedding. Dominic was not a businessman. He was the king of a world people only whispered about. He was cold, tall, and had eyes that looked like they had seen too much blood and too little light. When Amara walked into his penthouse, the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. He didn't look at her with lust. He looked at her like a problem that needed solving. He told her the rules. Don't speak unless spoken to, don't touch him unless the cameras were watching, and never ask about the men standing at the door with guns under their jackets. Amara needed the money, but her pride was stinging. She told Dominic that she wasn't a toy he could buy, and for the first time, the stone-faced boss actually looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, a fire that hadn't been put out by poverty or the cold city. He doubled the offer on the spot. He needed someone who looked like they could handle him, and Amara was the only woman who didn't flinch when he stepped into her personal space. They shook hands, and the silk of his palm felt like a trap closing around her. The transformation began that night. Dominic's stylist stripped away Amara's worn-out coat and dressed her in a gown of deep emerald silk that matched the richness of her skin. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the queen staring back. When Dominic saw her, he stopped breathing for a second. He quickly masked it with a scowl, telling her to put on the diamonds he provided. The necklace felt like a lead weight, a reminder that she was now property of the most dangerous man in the state. They arrived at the wedding venue, a massive estate tucked away in the countryside. The guest list was a mix of politicians and men with scars on their knuckles. Amara realized this wasn't just a wedding, it was a peace treaty between rival families. If she made one mistake, if she tripped or said the wrong thing, the peace would break. Dominic gripped her waist tightly, whispering in her ear that she was doing perfectly. His breath was warm against her neck, making her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. The sister of the boss, a young woman named Sophia, hugged Amara with genuine tears in her eyes. She thanked Amara for taming her brother, saying Dominic had been a ghost since their father was murdered. Amara felt a pang of guilt. She was lying to a girl who just wanted her brother to be happy. She looked at Dominic and saw him watching his sister with a look of pure, raw protection. He wasn't just a monster. He was a shield. This realization was the first crack in Amara's armor. The hour ended with a sudden crash of glass. A waiter had dropped a tray, but Dominic's men had their guns drawn in half a second. The tension in the room was a physical weight. Amara didn't scream. She reached out and took Dominic's hand, lacing her fingers through his. The room relaxed as he lowered his guard, looking down at their joined hands. He didn't pull away. In that moment, the lie started to feel dangerously real, and Amara knew she was in over her head. The wedding reception was a minefield of fake smiles and hidden threats. Amara sat at the head table, her hand still tucked into Dominic's. Every time a rival boss walked by, Dominic would lean in and kiss Amara's temple, marking his territory. He smelled like expensive sandalwood and old tobacco. Amara played her part perfectly, laughing at his dry jokes and leaning into his chest. She realized that for the first time in years, she felt safe, which was the most dangerous feeling of all. Later that night, the party moved to the gardens. Dominic found Amara standing by a fountain, trying to catch her breath. He didn't bark an order this time. He asked her about her home in Nigeria. Amara talked about the red dust of her village, the smell of jollof rice, and the sound of her mother's laughter. Dominic listened in total silence, his intense gaze never leaving her face. He confessed that he had never wanted this life, but he had to take it to keep his sister alive after their father died. A slow song began to play from the ballroom. Without a word, Dominic took Amara's hand and led her into a dance under the moonlight. There were no cameras here, no rival bosses to impress, yet he didn't let go. They moved together like they had been doing it for years. Amara could feel the steady beat of his heart against her palm. She forgot about the $10,000. She forgot about the eviction notice. She only felt the way his large hand rested on the small of her back. The peace was shattered when a group of men approached them. They weren't there to dance. They were Dominic's cousins, and they didn't like that he was distracted by an outsider. They insulted Amara's heritage, calling her a gold digger in front of the entire garden. Amara expected Dominic to ignore them to keep the peace. Instead, Dominic stepped forward, his face turning into a mask of pure ice. He told them that if they ever spoke of her that way again, they wouldn't live to see the sunrise. Amara saw the power he held, but she also saw the heavy burden of it. When they returned to their private suite, the adrenaline was still pumping through her veins. Dominic began to apologize for his family's behavior, but Amara stopped him. She told him she could fight her own battles. She saw the respect in his eyes grow. He realized she wasn't just a pretty face he had hired, she was a lioness. They stood in the center of the room, the air thick with everything they weren't allowed to say. The suite only had one bed. It was a massive, king-sized canopy bed draped in white linen. Dominic told her he would sleep on the sofa, but Amara saw how exhausted he was. He had been looking over his shoulder for 48 hours straight. She told him the bed was big enough for both of them and that she trusted him. It was a lie. She didn't trust the situation, but she wanted him close. The man who could kill with his bare hands looked genuinely nervous as he lay down on the far side of the mattress. As the lights went out, the silence of the countryside felt deafening. Amara lay awake, listening to Dominic's breathing. After an hour, she heard him whispering in his sleep, calling out for his father. He was having a nightmare. Amara reached across the gap and placed a hand on his shoulder to wake him. He bolted upright, pinning her to the bed in a flash of instinct, his hand around her throat. He saw it was her and immediately let go, his face filled with horror at what he had almost done. Dominic backed away to the edge of the bed, his breathing ragged. He told Amara to leave, to take the money and run as far away from him as possible. He called himself a monster who would eventually hurt her. But Amara didn't leave. She sat up and told him that she had seen monsters in her life, and he wasn't one of them. She told him he was just a man who had forgotten how to be human. She reached out and touched his cheek, and this time he didn't flinch. The next morning, the date was supposed to end, but the gates of the estate were locked. A rival family had declared war overnight, claiming Dominic had insulted them by not marrying one of their daughters. They were surrounded. Dominic's men were everywhere, checking weapons and boarding up windows. Amara was no longer a guest. She was a liability. Dominic told her she had to stay in the panic room, but she refused. She told him she wouldn't hide while he went out to fight. Dominic gave her a small, silver pistol and showed her how to use it. He told her he hoped she would never have to pull the trigger, but he needed to know she could defend herself if his men failed. They spent the afternoon in his office, planning a way out. Amara used her knowledge of logistics, something she had studied back home, to help him map out an escape route through the woods. Dominic looked at her with a mix of awe and terror. He was falling for her, and in his world, love was a death sentence. The attack came at dusk. The sound of gunfire echoed through the halls of the beautiful estate. Amara stayed by Dominic's side as they moved toward the secret exit. She saw the brutality of his world firsthand. It wasn't like the movies. It was loud, messy, and terrifying. Dominic moved like a phantom, protecting her at every turn. He took a bullet to the shoulder to push her out of the way of a shattering window. He didn't even groan. He just kept moving. His only focus was her safety. They made it to the woods, but they were being hunted. The cold air bit at Amara's skin, but she didn't complain. She helped Dominic lean against a tree and used a strip of her emerald dress to bandage his wound. The silk was ruined, stained with his blood. He looked at her and told her she was the most incredible woman he had ever met. He told her that if they survived this, he would give her anything she wanted. Amara told him she just wanted him to stay alive. A scout found them, and for the first time, Amara had to use the gun. She didn't kill the man, but she winged him, giving Dominic enough time to disarm him. The look on Dominic's face was one of pure pride. He realized then that she wasn't a victim. She was his equal. They reached a secondary safe house, a small cabin hidden in the mountains. They were tired, bleeding, and alone. The contract was long gone. Now it was just two people trying to survive the night. Inside the cabin, the heat of the fireplace brought them back to life. Dominic sat on the floor, his back against the wall, watching Amara move about the room. He called her over and asked her why she stayed when she could have run. Amara knelt beside him and told him that she had spent her whole life running from something and she was tired of it. She leaned in and kissed him, a slow, desperate kiss that tasted of salt and survival. The hour ended with them huddled together, waiting for the sun. Morning brought a temporary silence. Dominic's lead bodyguard, a man named Marcus, arrived at the cabin with news. The war had been settled, but at a high cost. Dominic's sister, Sophia, had been taken as a hostage. The rival family wanted Dominic to hand over his entire territory in exchange for her life. Dominic was ready to give it all up, but Amara stopped him. She told him that if he gave up his power, they would kill Sophia and him anyway. They needed a better plan. Amara suggested a Trojan horse strategy. She would go to the rival family, pretending she had escaped Dominic and wanted to sell him out. She would lead them to a fake meeting spot where Dominic's men would be waiting. Dominic hated the idea. He refused to put her in that kind of danger. But Amara pointed out that they didn't know her. They thought she was just a hired girl. She was the only one who could get close enough to find where they were holding Sophia. The plan was set into motion. Amara walked into the rival boss's headquarters with fake bruises on her face and a look of pure terror. She played the part of the scorned woman perfectly. She told the rival boss, a man named Lorenzo, that Dominic was hiding in an old warehouse by the docks. Lorenzo believed her because he couldn't imagine a woman being loyal to a man like Dominic. He took her to the basement where Sophia was being held, intending to kill both women once the job was done. Inside the cellar, Amara found Sophia. The girl was terrified but unharmed. Amara whispered that Dominic was coming. She used a hairpin she had hidden in her hair to pick the lock on Sophia's handcuffs, a trick she had learned from a friend back in Lagos. As they waited for the signal, Amara realized she wasn't just doing this for the money, or even for Dominic. She was doing it because she was tired of the world stepping on people like her and Sophia. The signal came in the form of a massive explosion at the warehouse across town. While Lorenzo's men rushed to the docks, Dominic and a small team hit the basement. The fight was short and brutal. Dominic burst through the door, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Amara. He didn't care about the money or the territory. He ran to her and pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. Sophia was safe, and the rival family had been dismantled in one night. They returned to the penthouse in New York, but the atmosphere had changed. The job was officially over. Dominic handed Amara a check for $50,000, 5 times what they had agreed upon. He told her she was free to go, that her rent was paid for the next 10 years, and her mother would have the best doctors in the world. He spoke with a coldness that hurt more than the gunfire. He was trying to push her away because he knew he couldn't protect her from himself. Amara stood at the door with the check in her hand. She looked at the luxury of the apartment and then at the lonely man standing by the window. She realized that the money didn't matter anymore. She tore the check into tiny pieces and let them fall to the floor like snow. She told him that she didn't want his money. She wanted him. The hour ended with Dominic turning around, his face cracking as he realized he didn't have to be alone anymore. Dominic crossed the room in 3 strides and lifted Amara off her feet. He told her that if she stayed, there would be no turning back. She would be the wife of a man with many enemies. She would have to live behind bulletproof glass and travel with guards. Amara told him that she had lived her whole life in a cage of poverty, and she would much rather live in a palace with him. They spent the night talking about the future, not as boss and employee, but as partners. The final twist came 3 months later. Amara was now the unofficial queen of the organization. She handled the legal side of the business, moving their money into legitimate charities and schools. She had transformed the mafia into a community powerhouse. But one day, while going through Dominic's old files, she found something that stopped her heart. There was a photo of her father, a man who had disappeared in Nigeria 20 years ago. She confronted Dominic, fearing that his family had killed her father. The tension was at a breaking point. She felt like her whole life with him was a lie. Dominic sat her down and told her the truth. His father hadn't killed her father. His father had been her father's best friend. Her father had been a high-ranking official who was murdered by a corrupt government, and Dominic's father had spent years trying to find Amara to protect her. The random meeting on the street wasn't random at all. Dominic confessed that he had been looking for her for years. He had staged the hiring because he knew she would never accept charity. He wanted to bring her into his world so he could finally fulfill his father's promise to keep her safe. Amara felt a wave of emotions: betrayal, relief, and finally, a deep, soul-shaking love. He hadn't just saved her. He had been looking for her his entire life. They held a real wedding, not a fake one for a contract. It was small, on a private island where no one could hurt them. Sophia was the maid of honor, and Amara's mother was flown in from Nigeria, healthy and smiling. As they stood at the altar, Dominic didn't look like a mafia boss. He looked like a man who had finally found his home. He promised her that while the world outside might be dark, their world would always have light. The story ends with them standing on the balcony of their home. Amara is no longer the girl with the eviction notice. She is a woman of power and grace. Dominic leans in and whispers that he has one more surprise for her. He has bought the hospital in her home village and named it after her father. He has turned his dark legacy into something that saves lives. Amara realizes that she didn't just end up in the bed of a mafia boss. She ended up in the heart of a hero. The final shot is of their two hands joined together, silhouetted against the New York skyline. The emerald ring on her finger catches the light. They are the most powerful couple in the city, feared by their enemies and loved by their people. The contract is over, the debt is paid, and the love is real. Amara smiles, knowing that her journey from the streets of Lagos to the heights of Manhattan was exactly where she was always meant to be.